Great, thank you. Corporate venture labs are increasingly seen as a way to bring startup speed into large listed companies. But which models genuinely move ideas from pilot to product, and which simply struggle to scale? In this session, we'll explore the structures, incentives, and the metrics that matter and how to strike this balance between agility and compliance. I'll be joined by Carmen Schmidt, Chief Business Officer at Volkswagen Group, Danielle Fazeldad, Senior Vice President of Digital Advertising at Deutsche Telekom, Tobias Hens, Partner at McKinsey, and unfortunately, due to illness, Dietmar Grischnik from the University of St. Gallen will not be able to join us today. But please welcome the panelists to the stage. And for this final session, I'm thrilled to be co-moderating this panel with Alexandra Straub, Executive Vice President at Cariad, in charge of partner strategy. Thank you. Please.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And sorry, my one last reminder, please do send in your questions online, and we'll do our best to include them later. Alexander, I'll leave you in your capable hands to kick off this session first.
All right. Thank you very much. So just as a quick introduction, today we'll talk about the incubator, right, about the concept of the incubator. We'll also hear from the practical insights from different industries. We'll discuss complementary approaches to the corporate incubator, and we'll then open up for Q&A. So then I would propose let's get started.
Yes.
So the term incubator, right? It's a lot used in the industry currently, in particular as software AI are coming to all this industry vertical, disrupting existing value chains, disrupting business models. So Carmen, what does the incubator really mean?
Yeah, thanks. So an incubator can be described as an organizational unit set up by a corporate with a strategic goal to steer and to develop disruptive innovation. It has especially the task to explore new future business opportunities. And in a nutshell, it is not only a product development, it's much more. It should be the golden bridge between, on the one hand, the entrepreneurial dynamics of a company as well as the governmental structures.
All right, so then why do large companies invest in an own incubator? So what's their motivation and what do they hope to get out of it eventually? Tobias, that's a question for you.
Well, the short answer is innovation. A little bit more elaborate version of that is innovation that they could have likely not gotten to internally. So that's oftentimes things that are a bit further out in time, that are a bit further out in the capabilities that are needed, or that are a bit further out in the business model that is being pursued to a certain customer group. And with all of that, incubators for corporates, and that's the way that you asked the question, prove increasingly important as a mechanism to complement their other often more internally focused and short-term focused efforts of innovation. So that's what the corporates are looking out of it. And then, of course, the question is, how do you do that best?
Yeah, that's right. Also, the question is, what is the right time to invest in an incubator? So how can companies know when to invest and when to allocate resources to an incubator and kind of focusing on that new business models?
Well, yeah. Well, look, I don't want to replace Dietmar's academical point of view here, so let me give you some insights from my very practical point of view here. I don't know exactly how to define the sweet spot when to start, but what definitely should be assured is that your core business stands on solid feet and that your board is ready for it. And then take a look at your industry and where you're positioned, and if you find yourself in an industry where you experience the fact that the necessary required investments are increasing, the margins might be decreasing, competition might arise from areas you haven't heard before, years before, and your core product might be under the threat of becoming commoditized, then it's definitely time to start acting and thinking about beyond core and incubator businesses.
Yeah.
Short hint to the Regie. Could we please have the 2 slides from the University of St. Gallen, although Mr. Grischnik is missing? Hope it will work.
If not, we'll go verbally. Fair enough.
All right.
Oh, here we go. Perfect.
So maybe to follow on, Daniel, you mentioned the core business, right? And I think, what do you think is really how to distinguish the core business from the beyond core business? So what are metrics you could use, what frameworks? So how define what's core and what's beyond core, really?
I think there's, of course, I mean, a multitude, and it depends on the industry that you're in, what exactly counts as core, what exactly counts as what we'd like to call adjacent, so that are things that are slightly out of the core, but very closely still connected to the capabilities that you have, to the assets that you have, maybe the people that you have. And there are things that are really new and beyond core that typically not only tap into a new profit pool, make your money from different sources, but also use different capabilities and put you in a position to derive your strength from being on a different control point in the industry. So, I mean, this is the ERR, so automotive obviously is core to what's happening here. So that would be the point where you can't just rely on building the best cars in the most cost-efficient way anymore, but you need to think about more ways to attract a customer to buy a product or a service from you. And then, I mean, since we're now having the double S-curve in front of us, there is always an inherent struggle between the core, which typically generates your cash flow and today, and the adjacent and especially newer things beyond the core that will not create your core revenues and your core profit and cash flow today. The question is, how do you actually distinguish those two in a way that, you know, you disentangle them to a degree that allow both to exist simultaneously? Which, just to be very clear, I mean, you will need both, especially in a transformative moment like the one that the automotive industry in Europe is in.
Yeah. So to distinguish also is because often there is different capabilities required when it comes to processes, when it comes to competences, etc. And therefore it makes sense to also distinguish between core and non-core, if I understand you right.
Yes, it's different capabilities of the different culture that you will need to innovate beyond the core, but it's also a matter of making sure that you give each of those, so the core and the things that are further out on the second S-curve, if we look at the chart in the background, the right to exist on their own and contribute to a company today and in the future in their own rights.
And perhaps to add, the question is also, when is the right point of time to switch from the first F-curve to the second F-curve? We call it, you see it at the back slide, it's the innovator's dilemma. So that is a very typical problem every company has, coming in a transformational situation. And I guess this is also what we have to solve. When is the right point of time to switch from the first S-curve to the second one?
Yeah, and I think for that, and now we're sort of wrapping back to the incubator, if I may, putting that into a structure outside your current core structures is becoming so important for corporates.
Yeah. So then how is this incubator concept linked to the corporate strategy, Carmen?
Yeah, I think it is very closely, because corporate Inter without a close connection to the strategy doesn't make any sense. So you will have something, we call it innovation theater. You will have a lot of funny futuristic ideas, but you won't have the value or the revenue. So in our opinion, it has to be very, very closely connected to the strategy, to the group strategy. And the interesting moment is once the corporate incubator will have positive results or first positive results in the projects, I guess there will be a backfeed to the corporate strategy, as you know, what kind of new resources, what kind of new growing fields should we step into. And this, I think, is a very important connect. So never ramp up a corporate incubator without a close connection to the corporate strategy.
All right, so I think on the conceptual side, we've learned a lot of, we have a lot of input to the corporate incubator, so let's dive into the practical insights.
Thank you. I think everyone now understands the concept very well, so I'd love to ask about the practical side of this. We've been talking about the right timing of when to do this. Maybe Daniel, I'll start with you. I mean, obviously, Deutsche Telekom has been doing this for a while now, but you do have a very strong core business, but you are looking for growth opportunities outside of the core business as well. I mean, how do you convince an organization to do this while your core is still strong? I mean, how do you know that this is now the moment to do it?
Right. Well, look, I think it's the perfect moment for Deutsche Telekom to exactly explore those things you've just described. If you look at Deutsche Telekom, it's by far the leading digital telco in Europe. Mm-hmm. It's the most valuable telco brand in the world, and it's worldwide one of the top 5 telcos regarding revenues and reach. Right. So right now, that means we're acting out of strength. And I think that's a very comfortable position to start exploring possibilities beyond your core business, especially if you want to secure your future.
But what about how to incentivize them? People will be like, why do we need to do it now?
I think it's really like the board has to set the culture and the objectives which we are all aligned to achieve. So our CEO Tim Höttges publicly announced we have something, it's just called the Capital Markets Days, where our board is presenting the objectives for the next 3 to 4 years. And he publicly announced an objective with a triple-digit million euro amount, which has to be achieved beyond core businesses. So he's setting the tonality, he's setting the whole board is creating the environment to dare things and to hold people accountable and responsible for delivering on that.
I see. Tobias, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about, I guess, what's different this time. I mean, we've been talking about this incubator and also working with startups between the big companies for a very long time. But to be honest, some of them have not really produced any results. Why do you think this time is different? And you've been working with so many companies. I mean, what do you see as the recipe of success from the various, I guess, the failures that have happened in the past as well?
That's, I think, the perfect question to ask, even though it's, of course, broad. So
we can break it down.
First of all, I think what's different this time as sort of what you can see out in the market, and I very much like what you just said, that there is a goal of a triple million-digit output in revenue by a certain time frame. So I think this time it's different that many corporates go out there and actually put metrics on the success of their corporate incubators, their innovation units. But they do it differently than they would do it for the first S-curve. The first S-curve, your core business, you measure that in quarterly cash flows, what have you. For individual businesses, very granular, very detailed. What you have in terms of success for what's more the innovation beyond core units is more a portfolio of, we don't exactly know what will bring the triple-digit revenues in the case of the telecom. What we do know, that something that comes from that general portfolio of ideas will. And the fact that companies are now bold enough that they put these targets on there has to do, if you ask me, and that's the answer to your question of why is it different this time, with 3 things. One being that these days there is a number of also startups out there, businesses, business innovations that do disrupt the core of how many, especially also industrial players, are making their money today. That was different last time around. If you look at pre-COVID, a lot of innovation happened in enterprise software that helped the core. You could get more efficient by employing enterprise software tools. Great. There was innovation consumer tech that helped you to get closer to the consumer. Great. That helped your core. Whereas right now, a lot of the innovation happening out there is really disrupting the way that you make money in your core. Hence, there's if you turn that in the positive way, a fully new way of generating impact for your company with these innovations and disruptions out there. Hence, this time it's different. There's true value to be generated in your core business, in your top line, in your revenue for your new business and new businesses to be built outside of the core. That's the first thing. Combined with, of course, there's a higher pace of innovation out there that is very, very hard to do in your internal structures oftentimes. As well as, let's not forget, money is scarce.
Exactly.
Just to put it out there. And setting up a corporate incubator or sort of a more broadly open innovation unit that uses the ecosystem to innovate can actually be very cost efficient versus trying to do everything internally with your own workforce. So this time, I mean, I truly believe this time is different. And I mean, if you look at investments into startups by corporates is a good proxy. Of course, incubators aren't just about investing in startups, so it's a good proxy that you can see out there. First half last year versus first half this year, we see roughly 35, I believe, % uptick in corporate deals in the startup ecosystem. So that should serve as a proxy that something is really happening out there and people start believing in this kind of innovation.
Right. I mean, it's quite similar to what I asked Daniel as well, but because you do say, I mean, this time is different, but also you point to the fact that money is limited. I mean, if you look at the car industry, you know, the companies are trying to save costs with all the, the investments they need to make in the technology, the tariffs, so many cost factors now. So, I mean, it's quite a difficult sell to say, you're going to be investing in incubator or these efforts, which don't necessarily generate immediate results. How do you actually, get the company's board on board with this, do you think, in this new era?
Yeah, and I believe this comes back with being very aware that there's different times of definitions of success for your core business, which of course has to deal with the tariffs and a lot of the things that you just mentioned, as well as your new businesses very much beyond the core, which for each individual businesses would have milestones and stage gates like, oh, have we built a first pilot or MVP? Have we attracted the first customers? So more process metrics, and then in a portfolio come to a revenue output metric. So I believe this has very much to do, again, with the realization that you need to have these two speeds and these two definitions of success between the core and beyond the core businesses, between the two S-curves, or whichever framework you want to employ, live in parallel to each other in its own way.
Okay. Daniel, I guess in a very idealistic world, you would hope that with these initiatives, you find some kind of a super disruptive technology that would immediately create a new revenue or a new revenue stream for a company. But in reality, that doesn't really happen often. So how do you measure the success of these efforts?
Well, look, coming back to the first part of your question regarding does it have to be disruptive or not beyond core business? Everybody wants to come up with something disruptive, but I honestly question that. It's never wrong. It's never a mistake to be disruptive if it's successful. But I don't think it's mandatory, and I don't think that this is the key asset brought to the table by huge corporate companies. You should really identify what do you have, what kind of assets do you have, and how you can activate them, and how you can formulate based on that a very unique value proposition, and then activate and leverage the assets you have and combine the dots. And then you have to have a long breath. Don't have the expectations like in the startup world or private equity world that everything has to be, bam, like a rocket within 3 years, because you live in the corporate world and you got to acknowledge this. So have stamina, have a long breath, believe in it, dare to try out new things and dare to fail. And the second part of your question was like, how do you measure success? I think different innovational approaches or incubators or R&D areas or whatever you want to name, there's always a combination of all of those things, and all of them have different objectives and different KPIs. So if you speak about my Beyond Core business, where I'm responsible for driving advertising business based on the assets Deutsche Telekom has, it's very simple, very easy to define. It's incremental revenue.
I see. Tobias, sorry. Can I ask an additional follow-up question? I mean, we were talking about how it's different this time, but I was wondering, are there any lessons that has been learned from the past attempts that is not relevant today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so what I think we can learn from the past very much from the efforts that have failed, it's a couple of things. One being, there was an excitement pre-COVID, in all honesty, of incubators, startup collaboration arms, open innovation arms being built. They then all got shut down during COVID. Why?
Right.
Because it was a huge crisis. Everyone resorted to what they knew how to measure, which was quarterly earnings contributions. These arms didn't have any, shut down. I think what the lesson learned from that is, again, building on what we just discussed, is you need to, when you start these instruments and these vehicles of incubators, define what success looks like, and then follow through with that. And with that, I mean, having then looked at, and we did a rather extensive study trying to figure out what the metrics for success or the prerequisites for success are in these open innovation, startup collaboration, and incubator units by comparing, by asking a number of, both startups that have been collaborated with as well as corporates that have incubators, if they followed certain principles and then measured the success or the satisfaction of these corporates with their incubation and collaboration programs. And I mean, a couple of things stood out. One being the commitment of the top management and of the top talent in the organization to these incubators, actually spending significant time on that increases satisfaction by a lot, versus if they're not. Things like consciously addressing the cultural gap between sort of these newer ventures beyond the core and the organization that they are in, also one like that shows up on the top of the list if you look at the attributes that increase satisfaction. But the one that's the most important, actually, is the one where you ask, well, look, but what you've set up here now, was that very individualized to the situation that the corporate was in? Was that very individualized to the capabilities that an external party could bring? Or was it rather generic, that was just an incubator and everyone could do something with it? And the one thing that really drives satisfaction by the most is the answer to the question, yes, it was individualized, it made sense in exactly this direction, exactly this context. Huh? So I think beyond, yes, you need to define the measures of success early so that, if crisis hits, it doesn't get shut down, is really commit to it, really bring your A game, make sure that you deal with the cultural gaps that may occur consciously and address them, as well as figure out what it actually is that generates value for you, for your collaborators, and then ultimately, a couple of years down the road, for the company.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yes, no, Daniel, I see you nodding.
It's great to hear.
Did you want to add a bit more? Or okay. Alexander, I think I'll bring it back to you for your next section.
Yeah, so Daniel, you mentioned this, and Tobias, you as well. There's different approaches. There's not only the incubator, and the incubator alone is by far not sufficient to go after new businesses, to address new business opportunities, to address disruptions in the industry. So what other approaches do you see, and what's the objective of these other approaches, and how do they complement the incubator concept? So let's start maybe with the R&D, right? With the R&D innovation. So how is this different from the incubator concept?
Yes. Well, Alexander, thank you very much for that question. I think coming back to the first part, I think we all have to acknowledge that there's not a one-trick pony or a one-size-fits-all approach for managing innovations, might it be in incubators or in R&D departments. I think we have to very well understand that each of them complements each other. And if you come back to R&D, I think classically, I mean, I'm not coming from the R&D department, but it's classically an evolution-driven approach to come up something internally to move the existing core business to the next level, right? Where I'd see an incubator more as filled with the objective to to find something new outside of the core business, outside of the existing company, and take it to a successful level.
Yeah. So is there concepts how we can use the external ecosystem, you know, on innovative ideas and how we bring those in, like open innovation or you know, venture clienting? This is also a different approach. Carmen, maybe you want to talk about what's different from that approach compared to the incubator.
Yeah, so open innovation is also a very important innovational tool. So where open innovation means you open yourself or the company itself and take new ideas, new business models from outside into the company, and a special kind of open innovation. I think it can complement the corporate incubator, and it is important to have both in the company. But at least I can guess that the corporate incubator will set up the project, the open innovation team gets into the company. So I think open innovation is very complement to the corporate incubator, and I guess that instead of research and development, it is more different.
Yeah. So I think in particular when we talk about beyond core, right, there's often the venture capital concept brought up, right? So venture capital, most of the big corporations have a venture capital or have been, you know, owning a venture capital firm. So they are investing in far beyond core, I would even say. So what's the difference of that concept versus the incubator?
Yeah. And I think to echo what has been said, right, all of these things, including venture capital, which potentially is a bit farther out still of these other concepts, should complement each other and have a right to exist. And if you look at, I mean, to distinguish these things a little bit, on the one hand side, where the ideas for innovation come from, is that rather internally, then that's oftentimes the case in your R&D department, or is that very externally? Someone else had a great idea, started setting it up, and now you want to participate, then the latter is where venture capital makes sense. Then you can still, of course, in venture capital, you'll invest in a portfolio of startups, you get to see what they are doing, you get access to a number of things and get to see them grow, and then potentially you will use them to help with to help you build an innovative product, innovative business for yourself. But that's by no means a must, right? Venture capital, as such, can also be played as a purely financial game where you participate in the earnings of a fund that invested in startups that returned more than has been invested. But I think, I mean, venture capital is very much on the outside of looking broad into the innovation ecosystem, whereas then if you go to the incubators and the R&D departments, it's very much sort of narrower in terms of breadth, but much, much, much deeper in terms of what you do with the ideas that are there for your own core business. Just sort of, again, R&D and incubators with a bit the distinction that while the ideas could come from inside or outside, and for incubators, oftentimes they also come from external inspiration, the way that you then execute on them, R&D, is of course inherently internal with your internal workforce. And an incubator oftentimes spins out businesses outside of the corporate, lets them grow. So while the ideas might come from the internal world or the external world, you use the outside world and the venture world out there to grow.
Yeah. So then it's basically not an either-or decision between these different approaches. The approaches really complementing each other, and eventually a portfolio of such different initiatives is probably a good way to address new business development and disruptions coming up in the industry.
100%.
And perhaps just to give you an example, like Deutsche Telekom, we don't want to discuss it right now here on the stage, Daniel, but you have both inside Telekom. Once you have this Telekom Hubraum, a classical corporate incubator, and you have with DT Capital Partners, a very successful venture capital partner as well. And we really see that both is inside of one company, and they're working very synchronously together, and especially very successful with the DT Capital Partners.
Yeah.
Each of them having different objectives, right? Some like purely focused on financial invests, and some of them are really like, you know, getting more operational as well.
Yeah, and I mean, what you do see out there, I quoted earlier that there's a rise in investment in startups as a proxy for there's a rise in interest in these kinds of innovations beyond the core, also oftentimes with either external ideas or external manifestation and implementation of the new businesses. We do see these days many corporates looking at their portfolio of instruments of innovation. They say, look, I have a venture capital arm, a corporate venture capital arm. Of course, I have internal R&D. Something else in the middle is missing. Or they look at sort of their certain goals that they have with innovation and try to ask themselves, okay, strategically, do I have all the instruments in my portfolio of innovation ideas that are needed to succeed in this world? Because and we had the question earlier about when is the right time to start a corporate incubator. Yep. And I want to say, I mean, when the right time, the question, look at the industry out there, the pace is rapid. We as Europe really need to think about how we can safeguard our prosperity and our sovereignty for the future. And with that, I mean, the best time was yesterday, likely. If yesterday wasn't right for you, it's today.
Yep.
All right, Kana, do you want to quickly wrap up before we open up to Q&As?
Yes. Well, Tobias, you just really mentioned it. I was actually going to try to take it out of the we were talking specifically about companies, but I do think it's an important question for Europe as a whole. We are facing a lot of disruption, intense competition from new players as well. So it seems even more critical for companies to find innovation through these incubator efforts. And perhaps the stakes are much, much higher now because we are facing a big, transformative moment at the, in various industries. I was wondering if we can ask each of you to discuss from this perspective of a more broader European perspective.
So now you...
Tobias, do you want to go? Yeah, sorry.
No, I mean, I 100% agree, right? I mean, if you put that onto a bit more of a macroeconomic level, you look at, I mean, GDP growth in Europe, and especially in Germany, of course, isn't where we would like it to see. If you look at the difference in GDP growth between the US and Europe over the last 5 years or so, the difference can be almost exactly explained by the American portion of the Max 7 and their market capitalization. So there's a huge need for Europe to get their act together and think about who, for us, for the future, are now the high-growth companies that in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time will explain why that GDP growth gap is at zero again. And I believe with that, we won't just be able to rely on, of course, the core businesses of the successful corporates that we have these days. Yes, that will, I mean, coming back to the S-curves, that will, of course, generate our cash flow today, that will employ our people today, that will pay the taxes that help us have our infrastructure today and everything. But this transition into the future and the question of who are the mega companies and how can today's corporates participate in the growth of these mega companies of tomorrow, fuel it, incubate it, back to the term of the corporate incubator, it's going to be the critical question for Europe for the next couple of years if we want to continue to live the way that we do today.
Thank you. Daniel, I realize Deutsche Telekom is not in a similar state, but still, it'd be great to get your final comments on the need for these kind of efforts.
Sorry, what was the last one?
Just on the need for these kind of efforts at this current moment.
I think it's almost for every company and every industry crucial to secure the future. It just would be, I think it would not be to be recommended to ignore the possibilities of discovering businesses beyond core to secure your future.
Right.
It's mandatory.
Right.
That's my personal point of view.
No, that's perfectly legitimate. Carmen, would you like to give some final remarks as well?
Yeah, I think we're very impressed about the success of Deutsche Telekom. I would like to underline, during your last capital market days, you got a commitment from Mr. Höttges. Perhaps, Daniel, perhaps you can mention it, because I'm really impressed from that beyond core commitment. The last capital market days this year.
Yes. So sorry, like I'm having difficulties again.
Yeah, I just said I'm so impressed about Deutsche Telekom and the commitment from Tim Höttges regarding the Beyond Core commitment. So he asked your colleagues, your Beyond Core colleagues,
yes.
To get what kind of goal. I have heard about the 300 million commitment regarding Beyond Core,
yeah,
right?
It's like, I think until the end of 2028 exactly, the achievement should be in the triple-digit amount of revenues coming from Beyond Core businesses.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And you see, I think corporate incubators are getting more and more important, and Tobias has mentioned it several times, and there are a lot of more surveys in the market coming from 2024, for example, stating that corporate incubators, there is the second wave of innovation and corporate incubators, and they're becoming more and more important. And so it was a pleasure to have all you here on the panel to learn from other companies. So it was the idea about this, this panel. And thanks, Daniel, and especially Tobias for your fruitful insights.
Pleasure.
Great. I'm afraid we're running out of time. We're not able to take any questions, but I'd really like to thank you, everyone. I know it's getting late in the day. Thank you for staying, and thank you for this great panel, and to my wonderful co-moderator, Alexander Schwab, as well.
Thank you for the great panel.
Schwab. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, it was a pleasure.
No, thank you. I'll just make my... Great. So this brings today's FT Live program to a close. Thank you to all of our speakers for an open and pragmatic discussion, and to our partner, Cariad, and to our global audience, both in the room and online. I know it was quite an intense program, so thank you so much for all your thoughtful questions. Just a quick reminder that the sessions will be available online, available on demand for replay on the event website. On behalf of the Financial Times, thank you for joining us at IAA Mobility at the Volkswagen booth. Thank you so much.
Für mehr Videos einfach abonnieren.